Sri Gurubhyo Namaha children, you are welcome for online class. Class 10, this is your Unit 2 Prose. Lesson name, The Night the Ghost Got In, written by James Gower Thurber. And here, this is your second part. Already in the first part, we learned that the author was having a bath and he was just coming out of the bath. He heard the footstep down the dining hall and he was just running to his brother and just telling his mother is sleeping in one room, his brother is sleeping in one room, and he was just going and meeting Herman and he was just telling that Herman there was some sound he heard down, and he also came out and he also heard, and he thought that it was ghost, and they frightened and they went inside and slammed the door. And the door was slammed. This was heard by his mother, and his mother woke up and she was coming and asking what had happened. The two sons were telling, and when they were, she was asking them what was the problem, she too heard the sound. And she thought it was a burglar inside, and she was just throwing a shoe to the next house. Bodwell, who is Mr. and Mrs. Bodwell is staying, and through the window he was just throwing the shoes, and when he was shouting that he is going to sell the house and he is going to go to some village and stay. And this heard when the mother explains him that there was a burglar inside and she wanted to call police. And Bodwell also calls the police, and let us see when the police arrives what was the situation. The police were on hand in a commendably short time. A fraud set in full of them, 2 on motorcycle and a patrol wagon with about 8 in it and a few reporters. They began banging at our. So here, as soon as the phone call is made, there was a patrol van, 8 police in that wagon, and 2 motorcycles, 2 on motorcycles, and not only that, few reporters were along with them. So they were just coming and banging the house. Front door, flashlight, short creaks of gleam up and down the walls across the yard, down the walk between our house and Bodwell's. "Open up," cried Aura's voice. "We are men from headquarters. I wanted to go down and let them in since there they were. But mother wouldn't hear of it. You haven't a switch on," she pointed out. "You would catch your death." I wound the towel around me again. Finally, the cops put their shoulders to our big heavy front door with its thick beveled glass and broke it in. I could hear a rending of wood and a flash of glass on the floor of the hall. Their lights played all over the living room and crisscrossed. Nervously in the dining room, stabbed into a hallway, shot up the front stairs and finally up the back. They caught me standing in my towel at the top. A heavy policeman bounded up the steps. "Who are you?" he demanded. "I live here," I said. So here what had happened, they were just knocking the door and their mother was not hearing and she is scared to go down also. The police just with their arms, they opened the door and they came inside, and you know the author had not dressed up. He was just in a bath towel, and they were just making a warning, so to open the door. So we were men from headquarters. I wanted to go down and let them in, since there they were, but mother wouldn't hear of it. So they were knocking the door, but mother was not, it was not audible to them. So all just break the door and they came. "You haven't switched on," she pointed out. "You had catch your death." I wound the towel around me again. Finally, the cops put their shoulders to our big heavy front door with the thick beveled glass and broke it on. So they broke it, the window glass and the doors. I could hear a rending of wood and a splash of glass on the floor of the hall. Their lights flashed all over the living room and crisscrossed nervously in the dining room. Stabbed into hallways, shot up the front stairs and finally up the back. So they were just seeing in the hall, and they were just looking in the hall and the nook and corner of the downstairs in the ground floor, and they couldn't find anybody. So they have just climbed up, they were just coming up and dining room and stabbed into the hallway, shot up the front stairs and finally up the back. They caught me standing in my towel. So they caught him standing at the towel at the top. A heavy policeman bounded up the steps. "Who are you?" he demanded. So he was asking, "Who are you?" So here he says, "I live in this house." So "I live here," I said. So the author said that he lived there. The officer in charge reported to mother, "No sign of nobody, lady," he said. "Must have got away. What order he like?" "There were 2 or 3 of them," mother said, "hoofing and carrying on, slamming doors." "Funny," said the cop. "All, yeah, windows and doors was locked on, the inside tight as a thick." So here he was saying that they were just slamming the doors here and there, and they were just now not there. So the mother was saying that he was not there. They were not there. 3 to 4 persons were there, and now they were not there. Downstairs we could hear the tromping of the other police. Police were all over the place. Doors were yanked open, drawers were yanked. So when the police all were around the house, and some police entered the house, and they were opening and seeing the doors and other things and all. Open windows were shut up and pulled down. Furnitures fell with dull thumps. A half dozen policemen emerged out of the darkness of the front hallway upstairs. They began to ransack the floor, pulled beds away from walls, tore cloths off hooks in the closets, pulled suitcases and boxes of shelves. One of them found an old zither that Roy had won in a pool tournament. So here one window were shot up and pulled down. Furnitures were filled with dull thumps. Half a dozen policemen emerged out of the darkness of the front hallway staircase. They began to ransack the floor, pulled beds away from the walls, tore cloths off hooks in the closets, pulled suitcases and boxes of shelves. One of them found an old zither. So an old zither was found that Roy had won in a pool tournament. "Looky here, Joe," he said, storming into with a big paw. The cop named Joe took it and turned it out. What is it?" he asked me. "It's an old zither our guinea pigs used to sleep on," I said. It was true that a pet guinea pig we once had would never sleep anywhere except on the zither. But I should never have said so, Joe. And the other cop looked at me a long time. They put the zither back on a shelf. So there was a zither, and on the zither only the guinea pig, the pet animal, will be sleeping. They said that it is meant for, and now that guinea pig was not there. So they were just having the zither in the shelf. "No sign, oh nothing," said the cop. "Who had first spoken to mother?" The lady seems historical. They all nodded but said nothing, just looked at me in the small silence. We all heard a creaking in the attic. So they were silent and they were not hearing anything. They kept quiet. They were asking who saw first and who was the person made call, like that they were asking. The 3 kept silent. "And what's that?" snapped Joe. 5 or 6. So when they were silent, they heard a creaking sound in the attic. Grandfather was turning over in bed. "What's that?" snapped Joe. So their grandfather was turning in the bed. So when they were turning in the bed, they'll be having a creaking sound. In the attic, grandfather was sleeping in the cot, and the cot was already loose. When turning this side and that side, they'll be getting a creaking sound. and I could intervene or explain. I realized that it would be bad if they burst in our grandfather unannounced or even announced. He was going through a phase in which he believed that General Mad's men, under steady hammering by Stonewall Jackson, were being to retreat and even desert. When I got to the attic, things were pretty confused. So when they went to the attic, something was confusion. Grandfather had evidently jumped to the conclusion that the police were deserters from Meadows' army. Trying to hide away in his attic, he bounded out of bed wearing a long flannel. So here the situation became worse. The grandfather was thought in a sleep he was, and he thought that they were deserters from Meadows' army. So he was army man. He thought that he was an enemy army, and they came to attack him, to hide away in his attic. So they came to hide away in his attic. He bounded out of the bed wearing a long flannel. So he was just out of the bed and wearing a long flannel, a nightgown over a long wooden pants, a nightcap and a leather jacket around his chest. The cops must have realized at once that the indigent white-haired old man belonged to the house, but they had no chance to say so. "Back, ye cowardly dog!" roared the grandfather. So your grandfather was just saying, "Back, ye cowardly dog!" roared grandfather. So he was weak in his thing, and he was saying that, "Back, ye cowardly dog!" roared grandfather. "Back it, the lines, eh, good man, lily-livered cattle." With that he fetched the officer who found the zither flat, handed smack alongside his head. That sent him sprawling. The others beat a retreat, but not enough. Grandfather grabbed Zither's gun from its old holsters and let fly. The reporter seemed to crack the rafter. Smoke filled the attic. A cop cursed and shot his hand to his shoulder. Somehow we all finally got downstairs again and locked the door against the old gentleman. He fired once or twice more in the darkness and then went back to bed. "That was grandfather," I explained to Joe, out of breath. "He thinks you are a deserter." "I will say he does," said Joe. So here he was fighting with the police, and he got the zither and the gun from him, and he shotted in the dark, shotted 2 times, and after we all finally got downstairs. They all went downstairs and locked the door, and the old gentleman, he fired once or twice more in the darkness and then went back to bed. So then after just once or twice he shot, he went to the bed. "That was grandfather," I explained to Joe. So he was just telling to Joe, it was grandfather, out of breath. "He thinks you are a deserter." "I will say he does," said Joe. So he says that he thought that you are the deserter. The cops were reluctant to leave without getting their hand on somebody besides grandfather. The night had been distinctly a defeat for them. Furthermore, they obviously didn't like the layout something looked, and I can see their viewpoint pony. They began to poke into things again. A reporter, a thin-faced, wispy man, came up to me. I had put on one of the mother's dress, not being able to find anything else. The reporter looked at me with mingled suspicion and interest. Just what the hell is the real lowdown here, bud? He asked. I decided to be frank. So here he was not able to get his dress in the confusion. He got his mother's dress and he was wearing his mother's dress. And the reporter was thin-faced, this man came up to me. I had put on one of my mother's dress, not being able to find anything else. So he was rushing for the dress, he couldn't get, so he got his mother's dress and he was wearing. And there was a lot of confusion in the thing, and grandfather was asleep, and the reporter and the police were just asking them what had happened. With him, "We had ghost," I said. He gazed at me a long time as if I were a slot machine into which he had, without results, dropped a coin. Then he walked away. The cops followed him. the one grandfather shot holding his now bandaged arm, cursing and blaspheming, I am gone, get my gun back from the old bird, said the zither cop. Hey, said Joe, you and who else? I told them I would bring it to the station house the next day. So here he was just saying that we had ghost, I said. So with him, we had a ghost, I said. He gazed at me a long time as if I were a machine into which he had without result dropped a coin. Then he walked away. The cops followed him. The one grandfather shot holding his now bandaged arm, cursing and blaspheming, I'm gone, get. So here one of the policemen was shot and he got hurt in his arm. And so cursing and blaspheming, I'm gone, get my gun back from that old bird. So he is saying that I'm just going, you get the old gun from the old bird. Said the zither cop, hey, said Joe, you and who else? I told them I would bring it to the station house the next day. So the author said that the next day he'll be bringing the gun to the station. So you can see that grandfather shot the police and he got hurt. What was the matter with that one policeman? Mother asked after they had gone. So after they had gone, mother was asking what happened to that one policeman. Grandfather shot him, I said. What for? She demanded. I told her he was a deserter of all things, said mother. He was such a nice looking young man. So here the grandfather thought that he was a deserter and he shot him. And the mother was saying he was the only person who was so nice. Grandfather was fresh as a daisy and full of jokes at breakfast next morning. We thought at first he had forgotten all about what had happened, but he hadn't over his third cup of coffee, glad at Herman and me. What was the idea of all them cops tarry too thin round the house last night? He demanded. None of you bothered to leave a bottle of water beside my bed. Do you ever realize what it cost for a thirsty man to look for water in the dining room last night? He had there. So now you can understand that grandfather was fresh that next morning and he was just telling the person when he is having his breakfast, and he was saying that what happened last night, the police all came and what was the problem. And he was saying that you forgot to keep water bottle next to my bed, and in the midnight it is very tough for me to come and find water. So do you ever realize what it cost for a thirsty man to look for water in the dining room last night? So he had us there. So here this his grandfather who has just walked around and they thought it was a burglar, it was a ghost, and they were having terrible things. But it was a fun that the last night they had, and they were just laughing how they enjoyed the day. And they handed over the gun to the policeman next morning, and that was the story. So I hope you enjoyed the story, children. Yes. To receive our online lessons, please press the subscribe button and you will receive the latest updates. Thank you, children. We'll meet you in the next class.